Hello, everybody, and welcome. A very special welcome from Denver, Colorado, live at Tattered Cover here in McGregor Square. This is the first time ever we've had a live studio audience. So give a big round of applause for yourselves. Wow, the USA Volleyball Show. What episode are we on, Steven?
This will be 47.
47.
Episode
wow.
47.
We started a year and a half ago, and this is our first.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh yeah! Wow, look at that, everyone. For those of you who don't know, my name is Clarence Hughes, event manager at USA Volleyball, and also co-host of the USA Volleyball Show.
Yep. And my name is Stephen Munson. I'm the digital media and engagement manager at USA Volleyball, as well as a co-host on this podcast. Really excited to be here. Thank you so much for coming out, friends and family. Let's just jump right into it. We're not alone here. We have three amazing guests, and we're really excited for this. Starting off, we have Sean Murrary, founder and president of Real Time Performance, a leadership training and organization development firm, and the reason we're all here, the author of If Gold Is Our Destiny, How a Team of Mavericks Came Together for Olympic Glory. Sean, thank you so much for letting us crash this event.
You are welcome. It's really an honor to be here and excited to talk about the book. And thank you to the Tattered Cover for hosting it too.
Yep. Thank you, Tattered Cover. And to your left, had to get my directions right. To your left, Doug Beal, the head coach of the 1984 U.S. Men's Olympic gold medal team, former CEO of USA Volleyball, and now chair at USA Surfing, which is a little funny. We might get into that a little bit later, but
Quite the career change.
You've got all that written down, though. Huh?
I do, yeah. No, this is just from the book, but we'll talk about that later.
All right, Steve.
And to your left, Chris Marlowe, captain of the 1984 U.S. Men's Olympic gold medal team, the play-by-play voice for the Denver Nuggets. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
The invitation.
Yeah. Sean, thank you again for inviting us. Tattered Cover, thank you for having us here. Audience, thank you so much for being here. We're just going to jump right into this. First question here, Sean, this is for you. You have a personal connection to this book. I imagine that's probably a big reason why you wrote this book, but can you just talk about why you wrote this book?
Yeah, well, my father, Don Murray, was one of two team sort of sports psychologists that were consulting to the team. And my father, Don, and his partner, Chuck Johnson, got involved actually in the 70s when Doug was still a player on the national team. Actually, Chris was a player on the national team at the time, too. And I didn't know a lot about the work my father was doing with the team. I do remember being excited about going to the Olympics in 1984, and I watched this team, and they really inspired me. They inspired a lot of people, the country, really. And it was a fantastic experience. Later, I thought my wife about 5 years ago gave me a book to read called Boys in the Boat. And maybe some of you have heard of it. It's a Olympic story of a crew team from the University of Washington that ends up going to the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, the Nazi Olympics, and beating the Nazi boat. And it's just an incredible story. I was inspired by it. And I thought, in the work I do in leadership development and organization development, I thought it'd be great to have a story, a book that would teach and really study how a team comes together, what it takes to perform at that level, and just study a team that makes it to its highest level of the sport. And I was thinking, well, there was that team when I was 13 years old in Los Angeles that won gold. All I really remembered was they won gold and they had been on an outward bound experience. And I thought, well, there's probably a story there, and that just kind of got me into it. And so that's my connection.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you remember knowing much about volleyball when your dad was involved with the team before that at all?
Well, I'm 51, and a lot of people from my generation remember that team and got really into volleyball. Yep. And even now, when I've talked to people who've read the book, many people have said, that was the team that got me into volleyball. And so I was excited about volleyball at the time. I got into it. It didn't last. I was more into basketball, so I didn't actually pursue. I am 5'11", so but anyway, I ended up not being a volleyball player. But yeah, definitely an inspiring team.
Mm-hmm. For Doug and Chris. So when Sean reached out to you, told you about the book, what were your first thoughts, your initial reactions to it?
I thought, what took him so long? No, I think lots of us who get into coaching, have a little success, think that that there are stories about almost every team that we've ever been involved with. Honestly, I think I'd been approached a couple of times and nothing ever came of it. I think for years volleyball was sort of the little hidden secret sport maybe in the country in some respects, and even within the Olympic
was invented
movement.
here.
Even though it was invented
Yeah.
here, yeah. And I'm not sure that a big percentage of the population would ever know that.
That's right, yeah.
So I thought it was great. Hopefully Sean thinks I encouraged him. Gosh, he's writing through the pandemic and spending a ton of time and a lot of money and resources. And I think anybody that's ever started a project like this knows it doesn't happen overnight. And reaching out to all the players, I was just enormously impressed that he was able to connect to every player on the team and get them all to respond. That's I tell him all the time, that's far more than I would have been able to get, I think, for him. So I think it was great.
I do remember one question back to me. You said, have you considered maybe just writing an article?
A short story.
Start with something manageable.
Yeah. A couple paragraphs maybe.
No, he's a lot like his dad, and Don was just a wonderful advisor, a wonderful partner, a wonderful addition to the group that was supporting the program and the team. And I don't know, they just had wonderful ideas and weren't afraid to think creatively and outside the box. And I think Sean, really did a great service, obviously to the team and to the success we had, but as much to his dad and the role that not just a sort of the traditional sports psychologist. That really wasn't his dad's role. It was just all about a group and how do you make the group function better and where are the issues that might pop up and how do we think creatively about addressing those and being ahead of the curve and anticipating things. And I just think that was a lot about Sean also. So I think he did a great job. So
that's why Doug Beal was the coach. He has all the memories and the numbers and the stats and all that stuff. When I heard that Sean was going to write the book, the only thing I thought about, I hope he puts me on the cover.
Iconic photo.
Oh, yeah.
Should be there.
which tells you a lot about the issues that we dealt with during
I had
the
12
whole
players
program.
that wanted their picture on the cover.
Yeah, I like Doug. You get approached by a lot of people on different projects, books, movies. Can you do a podcast? Can you do a documentary about volleyball? And what made me excited about this project is that Sean really seemed serious about it, and he would call me at all times during the day and, is this right? How about this? What did you do? And extensive interviews where he really laid it out. He went in great detail and he wanted to make sure he got it right. And it kind of, when I read the book, there was a lot of stuff that I had forgotten about that experience and how long, what kind of a journey it was for many of us, for Doug the coach and Bill Neville and Tony Crabb and all the players that were on the team and eventually got cut from the team. It was a long time in the making. So I was really excited when the book came out. When I found out I was going to be on the cover, I kind of smiled. It was just like, wow. And I hope it's a big success for you, Sean.
Thanks, Chris.
Sean, how do you take all of those perspectives and the stories and the point of views and put it all together into one conducive book?
Well, you got to learn. One thing I had to learn in the project was how to tell a story. There's got to be a beginning, a middle, and end, and all that, and kind of the hero's journey. And one reason that I did spend more time interviewing Chris is he had a very interesting role in the story, a very dramatic role. And I learned that if you ever go to a movie, you'll know there's an all is lost moment. There's a moment in every movie. It's usually 2/3 of the way through where it just looks like it's not going to happen. Whatever it is, it's a romantic comedy. The boy, the man and the girl, they're not going to get together. Whatever it is. And Chris just embodied. The more I learned about the story of the team, I realized that Chris sort of embodied a lot of the theme of the book, which was about a team. And Chris also had an all is lost moment. A moment where it didn't look like he was going to be on this team in '84. And fate and other things and fortune and turned his way, and he ended up not only being on the team, so he was cut, and we can probably talk about that, but he was cut about 4 months before, but he was invited back on the team due to an injury to another player, and then immediately voted captain. And so I guess your question is about how do you bring all these stories together. You can't tell 12, there were 12 players on the team. There were another 6 or 8 players that were really closely associated with the team. I couldn't write a book that was, 1/12 of the time was about each player and their story. I had to kind of figure out how to tell a story that the reader was going to be interested in and draw them in. And so that's what I ended up with. It was a bit of a journey, but that's, if you get a chance to read it, hopefully you'll be caught up in the drama of it too.
Are we asking questions about the book or actually what was going on at the time? Because I have direct questions for Mr. Beale.
Yeah, we will do an audience Q&A right after this, actually.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Chris Marlowe's on my show 40 times a year. I would think 40, maybe more.
50.
We talked
50.
about I know how you actually isolated Karch Grant. How did you find and isolate all the Spursons and Bob Swertlick to be in that service receive situation that you put together?
We want to get into this?
Yeah, we can go into it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. How did we do that?
The big guys couldn't pass very well, as I remember it.
Yeah,
The
that's
big guys.
that's a big part of it. Very, very few teams just go in this direction without any bumps in the road. It's pretty unusual. We came back from a competition that was pretty disappointing, and just committed to, we need to look at everything. This is just crazy. And I actually think the first voice that said, why are we having these big guys pass? They can't pass, was Tony Crabb. And Bill jumped in, and I was probably sort of late to that party. I think coaches tend to be conservative, not politically conservative, but we don't like to change. We want things to be as we expect them to be. What's the normal thing? I want to know how the team is going to perform. So you change a lot of things, and it's sort of a crapshoot, and that makes coaches uncomfortable, makes me uncomfortable. So I don't know, but we were pretty disappointed, and we figured we had to make some changes, and we were willing to do that. And one of the things we talked about a lot was, to be great, I think you have to be willing to risk failing. You have to sort of embrace it in a sense, and you just have to get comfortable with it somehow. And I don't know that there's a magic to it, but I gotta remember a day in practice, and Chris and I, before we sat down here, we were talking about one of the players and some drill, and I said to this player, the corner of the court, that's where we want you to stand. Put one foot on that line, put a foot on this line. And it was like, I'm not going to swear here because it's recorded, but are you kidding me? No, I'm not. And if you'd like to be on the court, that's the spot you'll stand in. And, so it wasn't like a piece of cake, and it evolved. And, we were blessed with 2 guys and frankly 3 or 4, because Karch and Aldous didn't play 100% of the time, and we thought it was important to play a lot of players. I still think it's important. And so, Dave Saunders played that role. Paul Sunderland played that role. I mean, we had other guys that could do that, and it kind of evolved. And some of the things we did with other parts of the game evolved, but they were they were a little different at the time, for sure. And I think, as much as I said this a million times to Sean, if you're going to write a volleyball book, you're an idiot. You're wasting your time. Nobody's going to buy it. Don't put any drills in there. Don't tell people how to play the game. Nobody cares about that. If you really can tell a story, I think there's some interesting personalities on this team, and the two coaches that work with me, Bill and Tony, I think were just really impactful. They couldn't be more different, and that really helped. They played off each other and threw things out at each other that helped us grow and helped us change. Certainly for me, it was huge. So
yeah, the don't be afraid of failure. One story that stuck out to me in the book was Bill would come up with all these drills and stuff and want to try new things, and he had a great idea for a play or a drill for one practice, and it failed immediately. It did not work, and the players didn't get mad. They respected Bill and his mind for the game, and they moved on to whatever next
I got
the next
mad.
one. Yeah, I'm sure you. Yeah,
I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I remember the drill. I think and I Bill's one of my dearest friends. But yeah, we did it, and so we wasted 15 minutes doing some idiot thing, and
it's a lot of time.
All part of the journey.
Yeah, the players were willing to try it, and I think to some degree Chris will have a different perspective on this. Yeah, because we were going to be in the Olympics. It's a huge lever. I said it a bunch of times. We were just really fortunate in many ways. So we were going to be in the Olympics for the first time since 1968 with the men's team. And, at some point you can say, you don't have to like this, but you want to be in the Olympics or you don't want to be in the Olympics. So we're going to go, and we're going to take the players that are willing to do the things that we think are important. And it's not sort of my way or the highway, but there's an element of that in there. Yeah.
As we're
Chris
hearing
really
these
wants
stories.
to get in right
Yeah,
now.
Chris, please.
No, I just it's interesting you talk about that. I remember vividly practicing against the Russian plays. The Russians had a very tricky free ball play where a ball would come over, and the guy would set it up to a hitter, and you think the hitter's going to hit, and he doesn't. He jumps and he sets it, and the guy loops around him. We practiced against that play for a year and a half, just getting ready for the Russians. Then interestingly, the Russians never came. Yeah. So
and we got good at it.
We were really good at it. We got good at running it.
We
got great at running it. We got great at blocking it, and we never got a chance to use it. But I just think you try stuff in practice. And I remember the big guys. I was a setter, and I remember the big guys. They were unhappy. They didn't want to go over into the corner and stand there and not be able to pass the ball. That was kind of you were expected to play all elements of the game. But Doug and the coaches kind of figured out, hey, it's going to be much better if we specialize. Let's have these guys pass it, and the big guys, you get over there, and when you get to the front line, you hit it and you block it. And I think that was one of the keys to our success. But before that, I can only remember that happening in the International Volleyball Association, where they did not rotate. They had the big guy in the left front, and big guy in the middle front, and a big guy in the right front, and they had a setter and then two people playing defense. And the specialization worked a lot better. It was just better because the little people were digging and the big people were hitting, and it was great. And I think that's how we caught up so quickly, I think, to the rest of the teams in the world, that we were specializing, using our talents and practicing, 97 hours a week like Doug liked to.
One thing about that, it had a different impact on some players, Chris, because I was talking to Mark Waldy. He was more of an all-around player. And after the specialization in the two pass receive formation, where Aldis was on the court more and Karch was on the court more, Mark Waldy was on the court less. Yeah. And he told me, I think it's in the book, he said something along the lines of, it was hard for me personally, but I eventually realized it was the right thing for the team. And I think that's something special about where the team was at that point, towards your journey towards the Olympics, that there was a lot of trust that you could try something sort of radical like this. And Doug, you said it, a quote to me I'll never forget. You said, we weren't afraid to look foolish. So you had the coaching staff had the courage to try something. The players were there also trying. And then some of the players had to take, less time on the court, or they played a different role, and they had to realize, well, the team was better because of it. And I think that was a great lesson.
We've kind of teased it a little bit, and we're getting into a little bit of spoiler territory here for the audience, but the Outward Bound trip, Doug, for you, could you explain a little bit your thoughts behind that in the moment, why this team needed to go on that trip?
Yeah, I probably do this differently every time I talk about this trip. So volleyball in our country was in a different place than it is today. I think that's the starting point, for me at least. Not nearly as popular, widespread. There were more pockets. And we had a few players from the Midwest, and most of the rest of the players were from the West Coast. And I think there were two dynamics that were working that got my attention. I would say troubled me greatly, but I'd rather say got my attention. One is this little cliquishness between players that had played collegiately at UCLA, USC, Pepperdine, whatever, Stanford, and the players that come from Ohio State, Ball State, Penn State, or whatever. And then actually there was even some, some division between the UCLA guys and the SC guys, and so we don't have too many colleges in this country that are playing men's volleyball at this wonderfully high level. We have more, thankfully, today, and it's not the same world at all. So we thought, gosh, if there's something we could do that gets the group out of the comfort zone that they're in. So it can't be volleyball related, probably can't even be sport related. It's just got to be, we got to be out of Southern California. We got to do something. And I'm sure Don, Sean's dad, and Chuck Johnson talked about it. And I think Chris was making jokes earlier with me about it. I think Neville bought into it like crazy. And we had to probably sell Tony on it. But we looked at a bunch of different things, and I don't know if you could even do this today. You probably, if you were in college, no athletic director would approve it. You'd say you're out of your mind. Anyway, we looked at a couple things. I think Sean talks about it in the book a couple times, but we wound up working an arrangement with this Outward Bound group, which is a really professional, well done, outdoors, sort of survivalist. It's really not, that's not really the way they want to describe it. Organization that grew out of World War II and it came from Great Britain. And they have programs all over the country anyway. So we talked to them about it, and one thing led to another. And again, I was telling Sean and Chris, they saw this as a way to expand their business. We're going to have a sports team here, that is going to be in the Olympics, and so that was attractive to them. And we thought this is great because this is about as far from volleyball as you can get, I guess. I mean, maybe you could go further, but that would be, even I wouldn't go that far. So yeah, we had a break in the schedule, sort of, and we spent about 3 weeks in the winter. So that was pretty different for most of the players from Southern California, and we hiked and we did a lot of things. And one of the, I have to tell this story because I think it's for me one of the most impactful things. Every team develops this hierarchy. Who's the best player, who's the best hitter, who's the best setter, who's whatever it is in basketball, who's the best shooter, and so your power in the team generally comes from your ability to play the game. But there's so much more that goes into being a great team. So you get out of that environment, you get players, get the team members to perform in tasks that they're really are just completely different. And all of a sudden the ranking changes and they start seeing each other in different ways. So Craig Buck, who's, seriously injured more than a couple years ago now, but was a really good player, but not a very impactful player in the gym. Pretty quiet, shy, or I don't know, whatever. All of a sudden, on the outward bound, shows some skills that are surprising. And rock climb. This is a 6'9" guy, biggest guy on the team, and he's scrambling up hillsides and he's belaying people, and he's demonstrating skills that all of a sudden move him up in that environment. That can carry over back into the volleyball environment. And so his role and his confidence and his relationship to the players changes in a positive way, in my view. Chris may, want to debate that a little, which would be fine. But I think that's one of the things that we were hoping to come out of it. And, why are you doing this? Why are you committing all these hours? Because I said so, or because you think you're going to get a gold medal, or why are you doing that? You'd like to fulfill something inside of you. And so we did a solo. We did a lot of, campfire stuff, but we did some really hard things physically. Chris will maybe not remember this as well as some others, but, back in that day, snowshoes were made out of gut and wood, not made for guys with 14, 15, 16 size shoes. Today, they're all high-tech metal, and they don't break. We broke a lot of them, and it was a pain in the ass. I mean, to get through you're post holing up to your waist in snow, and you're supposed to be on top of the snow because that's what they tell me, that's what snowshoes do. Well, they didn't work so well. Anyway, we had just a lot of stuff like that, and did it make the difference? God, nobody could possibly ever know the answer to that, but I don't think it hurt us. Fingers were numb for like a month or something, but I was a little worried about that. So
I would say for a couple things from my standpoint, player standpoint. First of all, we had heard Bill Neville was the assistant coach for Doug on the Olympic team, and we had heard that he had come up with this because the Japanese volleyball team in 1972, which ended up winning the gold medal, they had asked their players to do a task. They wanted to do a task. You have to do this or you can't be on the volleyball team. And their task was walking on their hands the length of a basketball court and back. You had to perform that task, which is quite challenging if you've ever tried anything like that. And so 3 weeks,
especially for a volleyball player.
Yeah, 3 weeks before the Olympics. I couldn't. I can't even do a handstand. But 3 weeks before the Olympics, their number one hitter, Seiji Oko, had not done it. And they were worried that he wasn't going to do it, and he had a couple of days left. And then finally, as Doug kind of relayed to me tonight, he made it with a little help from his friends. I don't know, like 3 guys holding him upside down, walking him down there. We got to have this guy. And so that's one thing that struck me. The other thing that struck me too is that there was a lot of complaints about it, and I was in on it. Not as vociferously as some of the other players, but I remember a lot of players saying, why do we have to go to Utah in the middle of winter? I mean, it's like 20, 30 degrees, or hiking 70-pound packs. Why can't we go to Maui and have an experience? Why can't we go to Puerto Vallarta and Dusty Dvorak, who was one of the alphas on the team, the best setter in the world, he came up with all these things. Let's go to Thailand. He wanted to go anywhere but Utah. And so, it was as physically challenging as you can imagine. 9 guys or 10 guys from Southern California and 4 guys from back east. And, hiking really 10 miles a day. We hiked an 11,000-foot mountain. And it was dangerous. There were crevasses and there were slips and slides, and coach took a header one time, and everybody rushed to pick him up.
Not really.
Not really. So it was, looking back on it, you can say, well, yes, this made a big difference because we won the gold medal. But if we hadn't won the gold medal, I don't know if we'd look back on it as affectionately as we do. And you can easily say, yeah, we bonded and we certainly got a lot out of it. Ate a lot of cans of tuna and stuff like that. But it was quite the experience, I would say.
So, Chris, you kind of talk about you weren't as willing as everybody else, but you were one of the more willing to kind of go through this with the team, and you being the captain and such. What did that experience specifically do to that team in that moment going into that?
Are you talking about the Outward Bound?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I wasn't captain at that time. I was not captain at that time. I didn't get to be captain until later. But, I think it formed some groups of trust. I tell this interesting, you'll see if it's interesting. So we're on Outward Bound, and we're supposed to, there's 5 of us in the last pod of guys, and Doug arranged this, I know. He put in the guys that didn't like each other. It was Craig Buck and Dusty Dvorak, and then I was in there as a referee, and then we had Mike Blanchard, who was like one of the great guys on the team, and one other guy. And so we're supposed to hike 10 miles and then go into a crevasse and do this kind of rappelling. You had to kind of slip through there, and it's really dangerous. One of the toughest tasks on Outward Bound, and we missed the cutoff, and we walked down into this wash, and then we got halfway down the wash, and we looked and we go, oh my God, we missed the turnoff for that incredibly tough task. And everybody said, well, should we go back? And everybody said, no, we're not going back. We found out that wash took us right to where we were supposed to be. And so we trundled down there, and we knew we were going to catch hell for it. And the guides who were not far behind us, they came into the camp, and we had already discussed it. So the 5 of us discussed it. Do you want to go back or not? And nobody wanted to go back and do that. So we got down to the camp. We're sitting there, and we nominated Mike Blanchard, who was the most believable guy on the team, to tell the guides why we didn't do that. And we made a team decision. We got together. We voted, the 5 of us. That's what this whole thing is about. And like it or lump it, we're not going back. And so the guides were really mad. And I just tell that story because that's the one thing that makes me chuckle about Outward Bound, that we were able to make a decision. And Dusty and Buck, who were at odds, and they were like 2 of our most important players. They were setter, hitter, big hitter, great setter. And they got together, yeah, this is a great idea. And it just, I don't know, it was just a little bond we had between our 5 guys. And then the next day, the guides came down again, and they said, hey, we're going to go back up there and do that thing. You guys want to go do it? And eventually we said, no, we don't want to go do that. We're not going to do it. So, yeah, that was the end of that. But an interesting time.
I want to say one thing about what, from my perspective, doing the research, I was really fortunate that there were a couple instructors. By the way, they refer to themselves as instructors, not guides. Guides. Yeah. Yep. And that was kind of important. Was something I kept referring to them as guides. And when I would talk to Peter O'Neill, who was the main instructor, he said, we were really, the part of the kind of purpose of Outward Bound is to teach the participants in the experience to learn how to do this stuff on their own. And so they really felt like that they were instructors. But one instructor named Randy Udall wrote an incredible report about the trip that you went on. And it was, Peter O'Neill also wrote a report. 2 of the instructors wrote a report. And one thing they emphasized in the report was they wanted these players to empathize with each other and sort of take care of each other. That was part of the design. And they described how you'd get to a camp, someone had to set up the tent, someone had to clear the snow, someone had to start cooking the food, someone had to gather the firewood, and then the next day put the camp back into your backpacks, and someone would be breaking trail. And what they described in their observations was that the act of doing that, for caring for each other, because to survive out there they really did have to work together. And I think, my theory is that had an impact too, that act of working together ended up building trust, which I think the team benefited from downstream.
I'm glad you went into that, because I was going to ask in your professional opinion and doing the research, how you felt about that experience and what do you think they took away from that. So I'm glad you dived into that.
It's easy to have a professional opinion when you don't have to go on the trip
right.
and experience it, right, Chris? But anyway.
Doug, why were you so adamant on 21 days? I know your father was pushing for a shorter trip, maybe 5 days. Or initially, I think it was 4 weeks, and you compromised with 21 days. But why were you so adamant on that length of time?
One of the interesting things about the whole experience of Sean writing the book is he would send me chapter by chapter, and I kept, I'd read it. He was meticulous about accuracy, which I really respected and thought was great. And I kept saying to him, I don't remember it this way. Maybe, did that really happen? Did we really do? Anyway, that happened 1,000 times. So I don't remember any of that part about how long. I guess we had some conversations about, a week wouldn't be impactful enough. 4 weeks is a joke. I don't know, that we're not going to go out there and kill people. And I remember flying back. I think I went to a US Volleyball board meeting directly from the trip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was not pleasant. The board meeting was the horrible thing.
Hope you got a shower before
and,
that.
Probably not.
No, but we had, I had, it's not frostbite, it's frost nip. Yeah, it's frost nip. I had lost feeling in my fingers. I was going, oh my God, am I in trouble here? I kept asking Dusty, can you feel your hands? Can you feel your hand? Anyway, so I don't remember anything else about it like that.
Yeah, Outward Bound said that the reason was they felt the 3 weeks were required because if it was just 5 days or even 14 days, the discussions that they wanted to have around the campfire, around the solo experience, some of the sort of epiphanies or the connections, the things Chris is talking about with Buck and Dusty, that those don't happen on the first day or the second day or the first week. And in the report, it does say later on, that's when some of those breakthroughs happen. And so they really pushed hard for 21 days. And, the players were trying to get it down to 14 or 10 or 5. They settled on 21. Outward Bound wanted 28. They ended up at 21.
To truly immerse into it. Yeah.
I sort of remember some of those conversations. We're talking almost 40 years ago.
That's right. Yeah. You touched briefly on preparing for the Soviet Union, and you guys were ready. You had specific drills for the Soviet Union just three months before the Olympics. You had several matches against them as well in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that's when you found out that Soviet Union would be boycotting the 1984 Olympics. What did that do to both squads? And one of the things that I found interesting that I didn't know about was how close the two squads were, all the way up to the coaching staff as well.
Yeah.
But what did that do to both squads?
An off-topic, but most relevant issue right now. So that series of matches was at the time in the Soviet Union. It was in Ukraine, Kharkov, the city that's in the news here. So it's a fascinating place, and we were there in May. I remember middle of May, something like that, I think. There's a huge memorial in that city, World War II memorial. There had been a major battle and absurd loss of life. It's kind of interesting considering what's going on in Ukraine right now. Anyway, the two teams were really close, which is a wonderful part, I think, of international sport, actually. They invited us to come over for some so-called friendly matches, and this is a team that we sort of geared a lot of how we wanted to play the game. They were world champion, defending Olympic champion, defending World Cup champion, defending everything champion. at that point. And I think every coach will tell you the same thing. You want to be the best, you got to play the best, you got to beat the best. Yeah, we felt pretty good about going in there. And they announced the boycott publicly after the first match. We win the first match in 5 sets. I give that coach, who's long passed away, there, a really good friend of mine, helped us in many ways, a lot of credit, because they played the rest of that series knowing that they were not going to be going to the Olympic Games. We won all the matches. I can't really tell you how meaningful it was, but the 2 teams were pretty competitive. I think they were important. They were incredibly important to us because it justified, verified, our moving up into the ranks of that elite level. We had spent an awful lot of time preparing for not just the Soviet Union at the time or Russia, but Poland and Cuba, I think, were the key teams that boycotted. Yeah, it was awfully disappointing. We had a barbecue, a Soviet barbecue. It wasn't much of a barbecue, but a lot of caviar and probably a lot more vodka.
Yep.
But it's a special, I don't know, that's a special part of international sport, I think. Getting really close to people from all over the world and just, I don't know, verifying something that of course we should all know, that people are just incredibly similar, have the same, fears and loves and hates and frustrations and whatever. The barbecue was just fantastic. We were commiserating with them. They were commiserating with us about this boycott. You got to put it in context. The 80 Olympics had been boycotted by a ton of Western countries. People don't remember as much, but the 76 games had been boycotted by a bunch of African countries. The Olympics were in real disarray during that period of time, just sadly politicized. And you hear all the time, from the IOC, which is really sad. I think they sort of manipulate the words. It's just one of the most politicized organizations that there is, and that's just the world we live in. And I don't know how you could avoid it. But the 84 games, the success of those games, and the couple of Eastern Bloc countries who did attend, in spite of the pressure put on them by the Soviet Union, most people think saved the Olympics and changed the whole dynamics of the size of that event. It's unbelievable. I think it'll happen again, honestly, in 2028. Again, we're getting a little off track, but I think that's a special thing, and our relationship, the U.S. team with the Soviet team, just got warmer and better. We had invited them to our country repeatedly. They had played in the United States a lot leading up to the 84 games. That continued after that, up through the Seoul games in 88. So it's pretty special, and it was really hurtful, I think, to both teams that there was a boycott. I think it's always hurtful for the athletes, and that's just, everybody knows that, and it still gets discussed, and it's pretty disappointing.
Yeah, Chris.
Speaking of the athletes, I have very fond memories of the Soviet players and the Russian players. Doug and I were on the team together in '76 when we toured around the United States, and one of the stops was in Los Angeles, and we took the Russians to Disneyland. And that had to be one of the most fun experiences of my life. I rode the Matterhorn with their middle blocker, Yefim Chulak, and he's behind me. And he was this big bear of a guy, and he was squeezing me so tightly, I thought my head was going to pop off when we went down that first drop. I also have another memory of a tour, and I can't remember which tour it was. So I'm in my hotel room, and I hear this knock on the door, and I open it, and it's one of their players, Pavel Selivanov, a terrific player, number 4. And he says, "Chris, can I talk to you? Yeah, come on in. He comes in, he closes the door, and I need to ask you something. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to defect. This guy's going to defect right in my room, and I'm going to be caught in this thing. And he goes, I go, Pavel, what's up? And he goes, can you help me get a salami slicer for my wife? Can you take me to the Walmart? And I thought, oh my God, this is just too much. But they were just terrific guys. I communicated with him maybe 4 or 5 years ago. He's still going. He's still, or at least he was then. You know, it was funny. I still remember all their names. You could see all their guys. Their setter's son is now an international star, so he keeps playing. And it's kind of a crying shame that they can't figure it out where everybody can come and everybody can play, and not have the politics enter it.
It's a pretty impactful adjustment there. How do you stay locked in, or how did you stay locked in mentally as a team? You know, from a player's perspective, from a coaching standpoint, how did you just keep the focus?
You mean after the boycott was announced?
Correct.
Yeah. You know, honestly, I think there was this little dip. I mean, those matches, we had been preparing for those matches, I don't know, probably as seriously or more seriously than we did for the actual Olympic Games that followed a couple of months later. Again, I think you got to put it in context. Through the first time we're going to go to the Olympics, we're going to be playing in the hometown of the majority of our team. You know, huge event for USA Volleyball, for the sport of volleyball. I think it really wasn't that hard. I don't know. I think the guys were pretty good at ignoring the stuff you can't control and focusing on the stuff you can control. We did a pre-camp, a pre-Olympic camp up in Pullman, Washington, which I also thought was really significant for the preparation of that team. That's harder to do today because of the volume of competition that the teams play in. But back in those days, there wasn't the proliferation of the professional leagues and players all playing overseas and doing really well. And so we had the opportunity to go up there and do something that I think helped us a great deal. We could exactly mirror the number of days, the schedule on those days, have inter-squad matches, invite fans in. It proved, I think, again, it proved to be pretty helpful, and super competitive group of players. And you know, we had to dial things back, I think, a couple of times. And you hear I think lots of coaches in lots of sports have that experience where you want to be careful about, you know, players get into fights, and we just read about one in basketball, I think. And you know, you want players really eager to play. You don't want them killing each other to do it. And so I think we did an okay job of that. You know, if I had to do it over again, we might change a few things, but that was really important. So it wasn't hard to get the team really excited to play. I tell this story all the time. The first match of the Olympics, we're playing Argentina. First of all, I put the wrong lineup in.
Yep.
So I screw up the lineup. First match in the Olympic Games, first set, I put the wrong lineup in. Pretty under control coach. But I have to sub Timmons out because he's hyperventilating. So it was not hard to get the guys excited. I mean, he was breathing in a bag on the bench, you know.
Wow. I
mean, I'd never seen that. You know, what the hell? The doctor says, yeah, he's going to pass out if he anyway. So, yeah, I think, I don't know. You know, we were a good team, and the team kept getting better, and obviously excited to be playing in our hometown and playing in the Olympics, and it was unbelievably special. And every Olympics is. They are unbelievably special. It's hard to overstate that, I think.
For Chris, Sean ended up using a lot of your diary entries, which I think was critical to the story that you wanted to tell, like you mentioned earlier. What were some of the moments for you throughout the journey as one of the players that stood out? That you know, maybe when you reunite with Doug here or any of your teammates, stories that always come up.
Yeah, well, to detail all of it, Doug and I have been down a long and winding road.
Yeah.
I would say at the Olympics, I remember that first match also. I was a substitute, and I was playing as a back row substitute. And I was just, I don't know if I was hyperventilating, but they had where you were was the bullpen, and it was like 50 feet down. It wasn't like you're on the bench. You're in a warm-up bullpen, and you know, Doug calls for me, and you've got these, and I run down, and they give you a paddle. They give you a paddle with the guy you're replacing, his number. So I'm going in for Craig Buck, and I'm going, okay, let's get out there. And the paddle snaps, and the head of the seven flies up in the air and drops it in there. And that was all I remember about that entire match until they said, we want to drug test number 10. He seems a little bit overamped. And so I actually got drug tested the first 2 matches. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah. Anyway, so you know, it was a fantastic experience. I was able to have my mom and all my family show up, all my friends, you know, girlfriend at the time, and to be in that arena and playing in front of your home crowd, it definitely gave us a big advantage. One of the other advantages that I thought was crucial, and not in a cheating kind of a way, but when USA plays Brazil, USA and Brazilian officials do not ref. You have a Chinese official and you know, maybe Argentina or something like that. But all 4 linesmen were from the United States, the host country. And more than one time, I always kept thinking, well, close play, it's in for the United States, or a big hit. Oh, it's out. Too bad. I don't think they necessarily cheated or tried to do something like that. But I always thought, you know, it's just, it felt like you had a lot of people on your side, a lot of people pulling for you, telegrams, just everything pointed to us winning that gold medal and going all the way. And we did.
You know, Sean, so in your professional opinion, in your work with real-time performance, what can we all learn, you know, us interviewers and us in the audience here, learn from that 1984 team?
Well, there's a lot of lessons, and that's one of the great, you know, benefits of writing the book, was just being able to sit back and pull some of these lessons out, you know, and look at what did they do to get there. I'll just mention a couple. I mean, one is Doug Beale's leadership. I think, you know, I thought I was going to write a book about how this team came together, and I realized a big part of that was the leadership. And so, you know, Doug was solving a lot of problems that weren't necessarily on the volleyball court, you know, trying to find jobs for the players so that they could practice 4 hours a day. They still had to work 4 hours a day. So he started this Olympic jobs program, actually back in Dayton, but brought that to San Diego. Fundraising, you know, getting enough matches scheduled, you know, getting the developing a logo. We got let's see, who was the spokesperson for Magnum PI?
Tom Selleck.
Yeah, Tom Selleck. Yeah, Tom Selleck became the you know. So there was a lot of things that Doug did to kind of build the resources of the team and solve these problems. And then there was a lot of things that, you know, had to do with the team. And Doug sort of alluded to one of them, which was he asked for a certain level of commitment to the team. And I think on any great team, eventually the players have to be committed to the team. And Doug set a very high bar for asking players, you know, well, at one point he said, you're not going to play, you can't play on the beach and play on this team. And that was hard for some of the players. Karch in particular, there was a really good player named Tim Hovland who was having a lot of success on the beach. And he also said, look, you can't go play in Europe and play on this team. There were players that had opportunities to play in Europe. Paul Sunderland, for example, had to turn down a contract. Other players like Tim Hovland eventually left and went to play in Europe. And didn't end up making it on the team. And so I think committing to the team, putting the success of the team above the individual was another one. And if I had to mention a third, I'd mention Karch. We haven't mentioned his name a lot tonight, but everyone I interviewed, all the players, eventually at some point in the interview, Karch would come up. And it would usually come up in some context of, he made us better. He went out there every day and kind of set the bar. He had very, very high expectations for himself and his performance at every practice, and he sort of demanded it of others, or he lifted everyone else's expectations of their own performance in the team. I don't know, Chris, maybe you could speak to that, but in studying other teams, it seems if you get to a championship team like this, there tends to be a player like that the leadership sort of comes from the players too. I mean, I could go on. I think there's a lot of lessons, and any team and any organization, you can't just take the lessons from this team and apply them to your team and expect to go out and win your own gold medal. You got to kind of figure out what's the right mix for your team. But we can certainly learn a lot from them and apply what we can to any team. I don't know. Do you guys have any others that you want to add?
Well, I think your first one was really I got 100 of them.
Yeah, I would say that I've always thought of the '84 team as kind of a special group of guys that came along at just the right time. We had just tremendous talent. We had a big man in Greg Buck, and we had ascending talent in Dusty and Timmons, and we had Karch. And when things started out, when Doug changed the scheme on how we're going to do things, it was because we lost a match in Argentina to Bulgaria, who was a really good team at the time, and we really outplayed them, and we had them at 13-5 in the fifth set to 15, and we just choked. We just totally gagged, and we were not together. Karch wasn't on that trip, but the rest of us were. And boy, they hated us down there. It was terrible. They're throwing things at us. They thought we were involved in the Falklands War. It was a nightmare. So when we got back and Doug started to change things around, you could see that this team had that special group. And in defense of Doug, I hear people always say, "Well, why didn't you get Hovland on the team? He was easily one of the great players in the country, and would he have made our team better? Maybe physically, but." I think Doug did everything you could possibly do to get him back on the team. And the final straw was when Doug said, "Look, you have to be here tomorrow or it's not going to work." And Hovland says, "My grandfather died." He said, "No, wait. Your grandfather already died twice. You've already had two grandfathers die, and you have to come tomorrow or you can't be on the team." Is that basically Tim Hovland? Tim Hovland. So I think Doug, Karch was able to sacrifice and put his beach career on hold, and he did a great job of that. But St. John and Mike Dodd, who might have made the team, and Tim Hovland, they couldn't do that. And they were making a lot of money, and they went on to have great success, but they didn't get an Olympic gold medal in indoor volleyball. They got some medals later, but that was a fun group, and I always think that was why it was special, because it was the start. It was the start. The USA men had never been really very good, and then to ascend to number one in the world and win the gold medal was quite the feat.
And speaking of Karch, staying on that just a little bit, I'd love to hear your thoughts on just the emotions you both had, Doug and Chris, watching the U.S. women's team win their first Olympic gold medal for their program. Obviously, you guys doing it for the men back in 1984. But yeah, what thoughts do you have on that? What emotions do you have? How did that change, or how does that change the game, elevate the game today?
Go ahead. You go first, and then I'll go. I got a good story.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So how do I want to say this? Karch was a phenomenally good player. Everybody knows that. I think he was a better beach player than indoor even. And the reason I say that is because I don't think anybody's ever had the success of winning with so many different partners. And so he has this trait of elevating the players around him in a really unique way that's hard to stat. It's hard to define in a really specific way. I think he's a better coach than he was a player.
Oh.
I don't know, he's been able to modify his personality to fit the role that he's in versus this very dramatic, demonstrative personality that he had as a player. Very loud, very in your face, very demanding. And occasionally you see that, but he's been able to figure out how to get the most out of players with changes that he's made. I've been around a lot of great coaches, I think, and he may be the best of the ones that I've interacted with, and it's a pretty impressive list, I think. So to see, I was certainly not in Tokyo, which was unfortunate. I think it would have been great to see that live. And I guess the other thing that's so impressive to me, I was going to say, but I was in Italy when Karch's team won the World Championships in, 2014, I think. Yeah, I think that we've had this enormous population of women playing volleyball in this country in the NCAA structure, and we haven't somehow been able to just get over that hump. And a lot of times we say, and I think there's some accuracy to this, that we're playing a different game with the subbing rules, essentially, mitigating against the sort of 6 rotation outside hitter particularly. He's figured that out. And the rule hasn't changed. We still have that limitation. I can't say enough about him as a coach, employee, et cetera. And I just want to add one thing because I'm on a roll now. No. He gets, I think, a ton of credit that he richly deserves. But Chris said it really well, I think. There was a very special group of players in '84. And Karch was by no means the most competitive. He was among the most competitive. I always thought Dusty was the most competitive we had. I mean, it would drive him crazy to lose, a warm-up sprint. And I mean, he used to drive me crazy as a coach because we'd structure a drill that was designed to work on a certain part of the game. He would figure out how to be more successful in the drill than we had figured out when we were designing it. And it would, work on a whole nother part of the system, whatever, but he'd win. And, I think Timmons was like that. I think Chris was like that. I think we had Saunders was like that. I think Steve Salmons was like that. It was on and on, this incredibly competitive group of talented athletes. And we had to figure out just a little bit how to stay out of their way, put them in a situation where they played a lot and sort of enhance that competition to achieve a way we wanted them to play. Anyway, Karch is pretty special, and USA Volleyball is incredibly fortunate that he's around. I think it was a tremendous accomplishment, and the women's world is just, God, it's that the women's volleyball world has changed, in my view, so much more than the men's. More physical, more athletic, faster, just the change in the kinds of athletes that are out there and the speed of the game. Men's has changed obviously a lot too, but I think the women's more.
Well, Karch is one of my best friends. I was in his wedding. He was at my wedding. And I had one of the most interesting experiences in Tokyo. So I was over there to call Olympic beach volleyball, and the beach volleyball wrapped up on Saturday. And so they scheduled us to fly out on Sunday afternoon, evening. And the USA women weren't playing until later that day. So I got to the Tokyo airport. I bought some hats and some souvenirs, and I'm sitting there. And I actually called my daughter, who's here tonight, Grace Marlowe, in the back. And I called her, and I was talking to her. We're on the phone, and she says, "Are you watching the match?" I go, "No, I'm in the Tokyo airport. There's no TVs. Nobody, half the people don't speak English." And so for the next, how long? Hour and a half, maybe. We're on the phone, and my daughter is doing play-by-play of the USA.
Nice.
They're up. What's the score? Well, it's 14-13, and it was as good as being there. I felt just total joy for Karch and his team. When you end up, he had disappointment before when they lost to Brazil, and then you go into the Olympic final and you beat that team, and you finally get that job done. And then he goes nuts in the interview, and I'm going, wow, look at him, he's going crazy, and he was, because he was just so happy. And I found out later that he'd had a battle with cancer that he had not revealed, and it was just kind of a culmination for him. I think he did a fantastic job with that team. Doug's right. He's a terrific coach. I used to call him up when my daughter was playing volleyball and ask him, "Well, how do you block the slide? What do you do with the slide?" And he was telling me, "Okay, keep your hands up, shuffle out to the outside, dive back in." And so my coach, the Arapahoe coach, always got a big kick out of it. "Hey, we got a couple plays from Karch today that we're going to work in against Grandview
Maybe
or whatever.
You should use those. Yeah.
We're going to try this out and see how it works." Remember, the ball only knows where the platform is facing. Remember that. So very happy for Karch. He was kind of the linchpin of the deal. In '84, he was 22. He was just ascending. Whether he was the best player in the world at that time, maybe not. But in '88, he clearly was. And after that, he goes down as one of the greatest all-around players in volleyball history.
I think just a quick other thing. He talked as coach of the U.S. women quite a lot about, we've never won an Olympic medal, Olympic gold medal. I mean, doing that means you're not afraid to fail, to not do it. And I thought that was really interesting, because very, very rarely do you talk about, we want to win the gold medal. It's hard to pinpoint this one accomplishment, this one spot, when most of the time you want to talk about the process, the trajectory, something like that, that's less threatening to you and your team. He was fine with that. So pretty impressive, I thought.
I know we're going a little over time here with the live interview, so just again want to thank you gentlemen for taking the time and sharing your stories. We can sit here and talk probably all night about this, if I'm being honest too.
Great
but
fun.
Our audience is probably jumping up. They want to ask questions
I know,
too,
right?
So.
Really quickly before we go into the audience Q&A, in addition to here at Tattered Cover, Sean, where can people purchase the book?
Yeah, support your independent bookstore. Tattered Cover would be a great spot, and I definitely promote that. And if you go to realtimeperformance.com on my website, I've got links to the book if you need to buy it in other places. It's published by Rowman and Littlefield, and also very fortunate that they stepped up to publish this book. It took a little convincing to take on this story, and hope there's a little interest in Hollywood. So hopefully down the road we can get this story on the big screen, which I think would be great. Wonderful story. People love the Miracle movie, the Miracle on Ice, and everyone knows that story, the 1980 Olympic hockey team. And this is another American story that's right up there. And I hope America sort of rediscovers it. And as we go towards 2028, the Olympics will be back in Los Angeles. 9 of the 12 players were from Los Angeles or the greater Los Angeles area, and it's going to be a great homecoming for that team, and I hope it's celebrated at that time.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you. I know
great.
you had this event already set up with Doug and Chris, and you invited us. So
We're just crashing your party.
Yeah, thank you for letting us crash the event. Right now we'll just jump into audience Q&A for any of our 3 guests here. For anyone who wants to jump in first. BJ?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi. Sean, were you familiar with Doug Beale's book Spike? And did you read it and refer to it when writing your book?
Absolutely. In fact, you know, if you look at the notes in my book, one of the things that my publisher required me to do is every time I quoted anyone in the book, any player, anyone, I had to do like reference where that quote came from. And a lot of the quotes came from my interviews. Some of them came from, you know, various archives, but quite a few also came from Spike. When I discovered Spike, I didn't know about Spike. Apparently my dad had a copy buried somewhere in our basement. Doug had a couple hundred copies in his basement, he said. So
they make really good Christmas presents and things. Yeah. So you want it to be reprinted? Is that the deal? Oh my God.
Yeah, Spike has all of the information in it. I mean, what Doug did is he detailed almost the score of almost every international, you know, major international event at that time. And no, it was a tremendous resource. All the players were great about sitting for interviews. Most of them were over the phone. And, you know, and also Doug invited me to his house. You know, Doug's got a reputation for not wanting to talk to the press, but for someone who doesn't want to talk to the press, there was a lot of press written about this team, and there was a lot of articles. So I don't know how that that was just irony there, Doug, or what. But anyway, he opened up the archives, and there was a lot written about this team. If you go back and look, it really did have a big impact. I think it had the highest ratings at the 1984 Olympics. And that's saying something, because the 84 basketball team was pretty popular, had Michael Jordan on it. But there was something about this team, it kind of caught the whole spirit of the country. And, you know, a lot was written about it. It was good.
What success do you give to the fact that you took the practices, once you found out your schedule, you took and spaced the practices going into the Olympics and played the morning practice when you had a morning game at the Olympics. Your next game you'd practice at the same time. So the physical life cycle that the bodies were going through were similar every time they went to a game. I don't know if you discussed this, but I felt there was a lot of success that went to that. And later on I told Dan Reeves they can't win football games in New York because they leave here, play afternoon games, and they go play morning in New York. He started practicing at 10 in the morning here in Denver.
Yeah, I did mention it, Gil. We were talking about the couple of weeks that we were up in Pullman, where we just tried to mirror the schedule of the games. Yeah, the thing that we could talk about forever is the Olympics is this very unique meaning no other competition is like it. So you rarely are in a village with all the other athletes. You know, you're rarely having to bus and all the transportation and all the security and all the other issues that you deal with. And so it's impossible to sort of exactly mirror it, but you do what you can. And I thought we did a pretty good job up in Pullman before that. And I think maybe the next two games, they were able to do something like that, but then I think the calendar has just mitigated any ability to do that. And athletes are playing, you know, the volleyball players are playing so many more matches now. They go back and forth between their pro team and the national team. Those that are playing, it's pretty challenging, I think. But we did a lot of that. And I think, yeah, I think it was. I think, you know, I'm going to say everything. I think everything we did, you know, yeah.
Hey, Chris, this is something I always wanted to ask you. You know, age is a relative thing, and of course, in the real world, it doesn't necessarily make any difference. But Karch was the youngest guy. Didn't go on the trip to Utah because he was in college. He was such a great player. Did that automatically just have him accepted, or did he have to prove more than other people? Was there resentment, any of that kind of stuff, you know, in the initial stages?
Yeah, that was quite a surprise that Doug pulled on us. The coaching staff had said that everybody had to go on Outward Bound or you wouldn't be able to be on the team. And so everybody thought that everybody was going. So we got to the airport and we didn't find out that Karch was not going until that morning. Then we were flying away. And some of the guys are really mad about it. I knew Karch pretty well, and I knew what kind of a schedule he has. And Doug can probably speak a little bit more to this, why he made that decision. But there was a lot of grumbling, and it's a big chapter in the book. Where the hell is Karch? Karch isn't here. Where'd he go? So maybe Doug can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Chris, didn't you call it the March Without Karch, right?
I might have said that. Maybe. Sounds pretty good. Yeah. Coach.
Yeah.
You're on.
So there was only one window. At the time, Karch was really focused on, I'm going to go to med school. And as I say, there wasn't any pro volleyball the way it is today. And we made a decision, if we're going to do this, we're not happy about it. But that was the only option we thought we had. Chris and I, as I said, we remember things very differently. There are times. I don't think it was just at the airport. It was probably a day or two before, but
Well, most of us didn't find out until the day at the airport.
Yeah. See, these were some of the challenges I had trying to write this book.
Oh yeah, there were lots of times I said, I don't remember it that way. It would have been better. Got another great story as I'm diverting everybody's attention from that. So Sean's dad didn't go either. I don't think it was required, but one of the other psychologists did go on Outward Bound. And so we're, I don't know, the players are whatever, 22 to 28 or something like that. So he's 45 or something, and a little guy. And he's supposed to carry the same pack as everybody else. It's kind of challenging. And I remember Steve Salmons particularly, who was one of the most disorganized human beings at that point in his life of anybody I think I've ever had on a team or been around. But you would see, you could always tell where Salmons was on the Outward Bound, because whatever he was carrying wasn't in the pack, it was hanging off the pack. And he looked like, I don't know, the flim flam man walking around, stuff is just flying off. But he, I don't know how many times, a lot, went up to Chuck, can I take, this pack away, or these pounds out of it? So it's heavy. And
I think there was a wheel of cheese at some point, or a wedge of cheese.
So dehydrated food wasn't like the top seller, on this. So we had a lot of heavy food, a lot of cheese, blocks of cheese. Yeah.
Tuna.
Yeah, and tuna. Tuna was okay, little cans, not so heavy. I don't know, a 5-pound, block of cheese. So we would eat blocks of cheese for lunch. We're going to get rid of that cheese so you don't have to carry it anymore in day one. Yeah, we're getting into resupply halfway through, and where's the cheese? We don't have cheese anymore or something anyway. So, but Steve, it was a great thing to see. So he's carrying things in his hands. Everybody else has got, using your hands to walk. He's a super big, strong guy. But I'll never forget several times, specifically going up to Chuck, and who's, half a mile behind everybody else. And I thought that was a great part of the trip too.
We're going to wrap this up for Tattered Cover, but Chris, I'm going to have to ask the question, what were you thinking when you were holding that flag that's on the cover of that book right there?
Well, that's a good little story. Like a day before we were supposed to go, we were staying at SC, but traveling down and staying at a hotel. And the day before, they had given everybody in the American contingent a 15-foot American flag. And so when we drove down to Long Beach, I brought the flag with me. And I thought, well, if we win, maybe I can do something with this flag. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. And so the challenge was getting the flag onto the floor. because they had a rule at the time that the players couldn't take anything out on the floor. You couldn't have a bag. You couldn't have, I can't even remember if we were allowed to take the warm-ups out there, but I was behind Bill Neville when we were starting to go out, and I had the USA Volleyball bag with a flag in there. And I said to Bill, I said, "Hey, Nev, can you carry this out for me?" And he goes, "What's in it?" I go, Can you just take it out?" And he gave me that look, and he took it out there, and he put it right under his chair. So immediately when the last ball went down, I think Dusty blocked the last ball, and went down, and pandemonium on the court. We were all in the bullpen, the subs, and we all ran out there, and we were celebrating and jumping around, and then I remembered, oh my God, I got the flag in the bag. And so I ran over to where the coaches were, and the stands were right there. And this guy goes, "Hey, Chris, take this flag." He's got this, this dinky little flag. I go, no. I got a 15-footer right here. So I grabbed it up and I started running around. I know I said that on Twitter. What was I thinking? I was just thinking, I'm just delirious. I'm just going to run as long as I can. I remember Jim Craig was kind of draped in the flag in 1980. And he was... I always just thought that was just a great representation, and luckily someone caught it on camera, and they caught that picture that's on the book, and I'm always going to be grateful for Sean for putting that picture on the book. It's my favorite picture of me all time, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah,
It's iconic.
it is. I think it was great. Of course, now you can take whatever you want out on the court.
Maybe, yeah, you can.
Pretty
yeah.
much, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
We answered it all.
Before we move on to the book signing, Sean, any last words to the audience here for our podcast listeners? Anything about the book or any stories? Anything?
Go out and buy it.
Yep.
Thank you for being here and
Yep.
listening to the stories, and tell others about the book if you enjoyed it. It really does. Word of mouth does make a difference. If I don't want to say the word Amazon here, but like if you do go rate there.
Hey Sean,
it helps.
if you do get a movie offer, who's going to play Coach Doug Beale? That's what I want to know.
Brad Pitt.
That's what I thought.
Of course.
Great.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thanks.